I just released this new stained glass kit for Procreate in my shop, and anytime I do that, I like to include a free tutorial to teach you how to use it. This kit is super simple to use. I've made some more detailed pieces, as you can see here, and if you zoom in, you can really see the different textures. I've also added light leaks that come through from behind the piece that help give that realistic look. And it's really just about creating line work, coloring it in, and then adding some highlights and shadows that really up the stained glass look. So this is the main art for the piece. And then this one just shows you the brushes. So there are 3 leaded liners, and then there are 22 different glass textures, and that is 25 total brushes. So the leaded liners, we kind of have a gently leaded, a bumpier one, and a really bumpy one. I believe I used leaded liner 2 on the outline for this piece. And then I did a more detailed piece. This is actually a coloring page I drew for my upcoming Modern Folk Art coloring book that comes out later this year. And I kind of tweaked it a little to turn it into stained glass by creating a frame around it. The original coloring page just has kind of the mirror with these details and the leaves. So I just really added some line work on the outskirts to create more of a stained glass piece. And again, if I zoom in, you can see more of the different stained glass textures. It's really just a matter of playing with things. You can see one of the light leaks there that I have behind here. I'm going to do a more detailed class to go through some of this because that's kind of a longer process. This is my original artwork I was going to use for this brush kit. I ended up changing it. Again, I've got like a sun flare back there that kind of makes it look like the sun is coming through real stained glass. And this one was really time consuming but easy. So I just did my main lettering and then the frame, and then just added a ton of lines, and then you're coloring, each segment with different. I used all 22 of the textures on this piece. And then this is what we're gonna make today. Just this cute little disco ball is a great entry project, and kind of you use these same basic steps for even the more complicated pieces. And then this is the piece I'm going to do for a full class. We'll make the background and everything. I'll teach you how I use the sun flares and light leaks, how I plan, how I'm going to do my colors, all of that kind of stuff in a longer class. So I'll leave that in a link in the comments if you happen to be watching this on YouTube. So for today, this is what we're going to make. So again, you will need my new stained glass brush kit, and it has everything you need for this class. The first thing we want to do is open a new canvas. Let's say I want to share this to Instagram. So I'm just going to do a 2000 by 2000 canvas. I have one saved right here, but if you need to add a new one, you can open this and click pixels. You're going to enter 2000 by 2000. 72 DPI is perfect for screen work. If you were wanting to print it, you'd want to do 150 or 300. I'm not going to click create just since I already have one, but if you were doing it, that would be 2000 by 2000 to get it square from scratch. That's typically what I use for Instagram. The minimum could be 1080 by 1080, but I usually do slightly bigger. So I'm going to go ahead and click my 2000 by 2000, and that's just also using the built-in RGB color profile. So the first thing we want to do is come over to our wrench icon and click drawing guide, edit drawing guide, and then just take your grid size all the way up so you have a quadrant. Now I'm going to be using Stained Glass Palette 3, which was all 3 of these color palettes were included in your brush download. And they're palettes I used to create the artwork for promoting the brush kit. So I'm just gonna take a black color and let's do leaded liner 2. Let me judge the size here. I'm gonna go a little thicker. That's pretty good. So I've got mine set on about, say 25, and I'm gonna click the plus sign so that I can easily come back to that size if I need to. So now just draw a circle, hold your finger down, and that will create a perfect circle. And then you can let go. But we wanna get this perfectly lined up. Sometimes it helps to turn on snapping, and you can get it right in the middle. You'll get those yellow lines when you've got it right in the center. All right, so now I'm going to turn off snapping for a minute, and I'm going to add a new layer above it, and I'm going to draw a line directly through the center. Then I'm going to swipe left, duplicate, tap my arrow tool, and click rotate 45 twice. And then I'm going to go ahead and pinch my fingers together to merge that all down. Now we still need to create some extra lines for our disco ball, so we're going to add a new layer once again. I'm going to start about right here and draw kind of an arc shape, just like that. And you can always click edit your arc. If your arc overshot a little, you can edit it and kind of drag it in a little more, or you can play with this part. I use that a lot, especially when I'm drawing coloring pages. It's really handy. And once you're happy with it, you can just tap off. And then I'm gonna draw a second arc, just eyeball it, roughly about there. And I need that to be on the other side as well. So I'm gonna click duplicate again, tap the arrow tool, flip horizontal. I am gonna turn snapping and magnetics back on so I can just shift that over into place. And I'm gonna merge that down, tap and merge down, and then I'm gonna swipe left, duplicate again, tap my arrow tool, and click rotate 45. Now we have the main part of our disco ball. So again, I am going to pinch those layers down. And if you notice you have any spots where it's not quite perfect, you can just go in and touch that up or erase. You can see I got a little overshoot there. And then that's pretty good. So the next thing we want to do is add some little flares to our disco ball. So what I do is add a new layer. I'm going to keep, actually I'm going to make my brush size just a little bit smaller. Let's try a little too small. All right, I'm at about a 17 there. So I'm just going to draw on my disco ball two shapes kind of like that. You can even draw it off the page and then drag it on if you want to, but I'm gonna draw two roughly there and maybe like here. And then, since it's on its own layer, I'm gonna reduce the opacity of layer one. I just tap the N and take the opacity down. Make sure I'm on layer one, grab my eraser, and I'm just gonna erase out those disco ball lines. And do that for both of these. And then I can turn my opacity back up and merge those layers down. So that's step one, is our line work. And the next step, we will add color. When I add color, what I usually do is add a new layer, tap it, and sometimes easier with your finger, tap it and drag it down. I like to name my layers to keep them organized. So I would usually name this layer line work. And then this layer, we're gonna add our color. So I'll call that color. And now what we're gonna do is just pick various colors and textures and color them in. So I'll reduce my brush size, and then you could do all the pink ones with the same brush if you wanted, like as if you were using that same kind of glass on your whole piece. Or you could use different brushes. The brushes have different built-in opacity, so a lot of them will give you that glass look on their own, as well as some of the sun shining through effects. So when it comes to this coloring part, I really just play around with colors and textures. Like, you know, sometimes you can do it off to the side here and see like that one's lighter, that one's quite a bit darker. So even though I'm using the same color pink, that one gives me quite a different look. So I could use really the same color and do it in different spots, and it looks like I'm using two different kinds of glass. So I've got that crackled one there. And just fill in a couple more spots. I try to think about balance and where, you know, if I have a hot pink here, maybe I need one over here. And maybe one more here. And I try to keep the pen down on the page and don't lift it up until I'm done coloring that section. Otherwise you can get some weird overlap. However, the brushes are designed that if you want to make it deeper, you can go right back over it without lifting your brush pen and get kind of a deeper look with the same effect without weirdness. So what I mean is, if I'm over here pretending I'm coloring, if I accidentally get my brush off the page, see that overlap? So I want to keep my pen down so it's consistent. However, if I want to layer it, I can layer it and it'll go in the exact same spot. The other thing that's worth noting is if you're coloring, especially if you're doing one of the bigger pieces and you've colored your whole piece, let's say, and you get done and you think you have it all colored in, but then later you realize, oh, I missed a little spot. You don't have to go back and completely redo it. What I just do is take this tool on like a soft blender brush, which you can do built in with Procreate, like, where are they? The spray paints, or that's not what I want, airbrushing. So like the soft brush and the smudge tool. And I'm just gonna keep it really small, and you can just kind of gently tap away the spot you missed. You don't have to necessarily erase it and go back and redo it. So that's something I actually do use quite a bit, especially on the edges if you were zoomed out and not zoomed in when you were coloring. So you can do that. So I won't make you watch me do this whole thing. I'm just 2-finger tapping to undo this section because I don't want that to be pink. An easier way to do that might be to grab my selection tool here, hand select. I could cut like that, or I could have just moved it off the page. So anyway, for this step, I'm just gonna keep changing colors. Like maybe now I'll wanna use some purple, and I try to just use as many glass brushes as possible because it really helps give that overall effect. Whoop. And I'll keep alternating until my whole disco ball is colored. And don't forget about your little sparks here. I did those, I think, in yellow the first time, but you can really do whatever colors you want. So go through and color everything, pause the video, and just play around, have fun with the different choices and colors and brushes. I really like some of these marbled glass ones. They have really fun textures, but get your whole ball colored in, and then we'll come back and add some finishing details that help make it look really realistic. All right, so step 1 was line work, step 2 was color. So I've got my whole ball colored in now. This is what it looks like. So I've got my line work and then my color underneath. Sometimes what I will do, for a simple piece like this, it's not a big deal, but sometimes what I'll do when I'm going through the coloring phase is I'll use a different layer for each color. So like pink's on one layer, purple's on one layer, blue's on one layer, and then merge them all down into one layer later down the road. So that's what I've done here. So I've got all my color on one layer and line work. Now we're going to swipe left on our line work layer, click duplicate, tap it, and rename highlight. And this is just a really easy way to add highlights. So I am going to tap my magic wand tool, tap hue, saturation, and brightness, and bring it all the way up to max there. So you can't see it because it's behind there, but it is there. So if I turn off my background, you can see I've got my highlight layer right there. Now what I'm going to do is tap the magic wand tool again, click motion blur, and I'm gonna drag to the top of my page around like a 12%. And then I'm just gonna kind of tap this towards that upper corner. And you can see, if I zoom in and I turn it on and off, I've created kind of a highlight, which we would get if the sun was coming through behind this. Likewise, we need to do a shadow. So I am going to swipe left on my line work, click duplicate, tap the bottom one and rename it shadow. And again, I'm gonna bring that below my highlight layer. So layer, I'm gonna, oops, didn't wanna group it. Tap it, drag it. And again, I'm gonna click the magic wand tool, motion blur, and this time I'm gonna do the same thing, but I'm going to drag it towards this corner of my page for the same exact amount, 12%. And then again, I'm just gonna tap it into place there. And it's way too strong. So to fix that, I'm just gonna tap my in layer and reduce it to maybe, let's go with like a 20%. little more subtle, but still adds a lot of dimension, especially if you zoom in, you can see. If I tap those off, it's really flat. That helps add some dimension. And then one other fun thing I like to do to add a realistic look is to swipe left on my color layer, click duplicate, and I'm gonna rename this, having issues today. I'll just rename it fully. Color Glow. And then same thing, I'm just gonna tap the magic wand tool, the motion blur, and I'm gonna have my sun be kind of up here, I think, and my glow this way. It doesn't really matter too much. So I've made a little glow. I'm gonna turn snapping off. And I did around 12, 13%. And you can just see that down here adds a little color glow. However, it's kind of harsh and I don't really like how harsh it looks. It's not as realistic. So the second step I do is come back to the magic wand tool, click Gaussian blur, put my pen on the page and just kind of do it until it's more subtle. So I'm just at like 4% right there, maybe 5%. And it makes the glow a little more melty. There's probably a better word for that, but that to me looks a little more realistic. I'm just gonna shift this a little more like that. You can play with it too if you want to freeform this side and you just want the glow to be more at the bottom there. Kind of depends on where your sunshine is supposed to be coming from. And then I like to add a few finishing details. So we'll do that in the next step. We have a background color picker here, but I usually tend to add my own layer, rename it background, and use that instead. It's just part of my workflow. It's personal preference, and I just find it easier for me to focus. I want to do like a really light kind of pink peachy. So I'm just going to test this out. And that's way too bright, but maybe I can just, yeah, I like that. So I'm going to use that color and reduce my opacity. Then I'm going to add a new layer at the top, and I'll rename that Details. For my disco ball, I just did a super simple line. So I'm going to maybe use Leaded Liner 1. And let's see, that's a pretty good size actually. I'm at about 5% right there. And then I'm just going to draw a string from the top. And if I put my finger down, I get a perfectly straight line. And then I can kind of tap it into place with the arrow tool. So you could be done there. You could add a little phrase for social media. I actually also took a brush from my Stardust kit. I think I used this one originally. And then I did 2 little stamps here and like a couple little sparkles just to kind of finish it off. And then that's really it. That's the basic process to do any of the pieces that I showed you earlier. If you wanted to export this, you would just click your wrench icon, share, and then you can export it as any of these options. If you wanted to share it as more clip art, then just turn off the background and the background color. Then you can really see that glow there too. Like maybe you want to try putting it on a picture of a window or something from Unsplash, then you would export it as a PNG with the transparent background. So again, I will be doing a more detailed class on this one because it's a lot longer and more complicated, but these basic steps are what I did for all of these pieces, just with a few hacks to make the process even quicker for when you're doing something large scale like that, such as symmetry tools. There's a hack I use for coloring a lot quicker. And then again, the light leaks and the sun flares. And then all the background was created from scratch with built-in Procreate brushes. So that will be in the full stained glass class. I hope you have fun creating with this kit. And I can't wait to see what you make. Tag me on Instagram at @ByDawnNicole. And thanks so much.